So hi, hello and welcome again. Microbehunter here, I'm Oliver, and today in this video I wanted to answer a question from one of my viewers. And here's the question. I found mold on a sealed chocolate mousse the other day. I removed the big bits and ate it anyway, and they used to say that eating mold is good for your immune system, but I guess they were wrong. Well, yes, they were wrong because, it is indeed not good to eat mold, even if you scoop it away. But I do have to admit that this question does sound a little bit deliberately provocative, but I think it's a good starting point in any case to discuss this topic. The short answer is, of course, I would not eat the mold. I'd throw away the whole thing because the risk of food poisoning is simply too high. And first of all, if you have a sealed packaged product and there is already mold inside, well then I think that something went really wrong during the manufacturing and the packaging, because some fungal spores must have somehow gotten into the packaging before it was closed, and in that case for me the product is simply bad, and I would not even try to save it. And even for normal food at home, if there's a problem with scraping off the mold, because what you see on the surface is only the visible part, the colored fluffy part, because the fungus is much larger and it actually grows in thin filaments that go into the food. So even if you scoop away the visible part, there are still fungal cells left inside the food. So to really remove all of it, you would have to cut away a very generous part of the food, and with soft foods you still cannot be absolutely sure that everything's removed. Now, a quick side note, because this always comes up. Yes, there are molds that are intentionally used in food, for example, blue cheese or camembert cheese. Now, these are very specific, well-studied fungal strains that are grown under controlled conditions. Food producers know exactly which species they are using, and the strains are selected because they do not produce any dangerous toxins under normal conditions. Now, that is completely different from some random mold that suddenly appears on your bread, jam or leftovers at home. So just because some molds are used in cheese, does not mean of course that the mold on food is generally safe. But the main problem is not even the fungus itself, because many molds produce toxins, and these toxins are molecules that can diffuse through the food. So in soft moist foods like, for example, bread, spreads, soft cheese, yogurt, and like also the chocolate mousse, this can happen quite quickly, and very hard foods, it's a little bit slower. But as soon as I see visible mold, I personally don't want to eat it anymore in any case. So if mold is visible on soft food, my rule is simply throw it out in any case. And honestly, it doesn't even matter if the food is soft or not soft, just throw it out. Now, there is also a second problem, because if mold has already started to grow, then the chances are high that bacteria are there as well. And if you scoop out the mold, then you're also spreading around the fungal pieces and any bacteria that are in there as well. So you might not even see them, but you still end up eating them. And some bacteria also produce toxins, and of course the classic example is cooked rice or other starchy foods that are left out in the room temperature for several hours or a few days even, because a bacterium called Bacillus cereus can grow there and produce toxins that are not destroyed even when you reheat the rice. So the rice can look and smell completely normal, but still causes food poisoning, and you definitely don't want that to happen. So from a microbiology point of view, food is clearly spoiled. I would not try to rescue it by scraping off a small part. Now, to the second part of the question. Well, is mold maybe good for your immune system? Well, eating moldy food is not a healthy way of training, under quotation marks, your immune system. You're mainly taking in toxins and spoiled food, and this can cause food poisoning and make you quite sick. That's not a helpful workout for the immune system. However, there is an interesting and more positive side aspect as well, because children who've grown up on farms, who are in contact with hay, with animals, soil, and also dust, so in other words with many different microorganisms and also spores in the air, they seem to have a lower risk of allergies and asthma later on. Now, so some early exposure to a diverse mix of environmental microbes can indeed help the immune system to develop properly. But this is of course not the same same as eating moldy food. And yeah, breathing in a bit of farm dust is one thing, but regularly eating spoiled food is something entirely different. Now the same also goes for moldy walls and damp buildings, the so-called the sick building syndrome. Now that kind of mold exposure is also not healthy and can cause problems, especially in the airways. So whenever you hear mold is good for the immune system, you have to be really careful, because there are very specific circumstances and situations where early natural exposure to microorganisms might be helpful. Here you also have to be a little bit careful, but this does not mean that moldy food or moldy houses are a good idea. Well, maybe one last personal note. Many years ago, I was eating breakfast in semi-darkness. I had lights turned off, and only after a few bites I turned on the light, and I've seen that the bread was actually really nicely covered with green mold. Not a good thing. And since then I always take a quick look at my food before eating it, and you can also smell it, of course, and if it tastes strange, then you know it's not good. So to summarize, yeah, if there's visible mold on the food, throw it out. Yeah, no questions asked. Scraping off the mold does not remove all of the fungal cells or bacteria. Toxins can still be present in the food, which might cause food poisoning. Eating spoiled food is not healthy for training the immune system, and some defined molds in certain cheeses are safe because they're controlled strains, but this does of course not apply to random mold at home. And of course, early contact with nature and farm environments can help the immune system, but that is again completely different story. Yeah, so let's not mix up those things. From my side, that's all. I say thank you for watching, happy microbe hunting as always, and hope to see you again in the next video. Bye bye.